two, one.
I'm D Revolution, poet, author, entrepreneur. Most people know from doing spoken word, but what many people don't know, I started my journey with storytelling many years before spoken word, and at this point, I have two books that I have released. I'm sort of shifting gears back into storytelling. The whole story of why I started doing storytelling is that I went to film school in Chicago, and I seen the movie Do the Right Thing, and when I seen that movie, I felt like it was something that I could write. That the writing, the story really appealed to me, so I watched the movie continuously over and over and over. So I sat down and started writing some things, but I knew nothing about film. I knew nothing about screenplays, and I tried to write a screenplay because the idea I had was to write a film one day, to direct a film one day, and so I started writing. Didn't know what I was doing, just writing stories, and then I took what I wrote to two friends of mine, and at the time, these two friends was already in film school and they knew a little something about screenplay, and they really like tore my reading my stuff to shreds. They really talked bad about it. They really really stomped all over me. But until this day, I really feel like that was one of the best moments that I had. It didn't feel good at the time, but it really made me focus in on storytelling and how to tell the story. And one of those friends eventually bought me a book on screenwriting. So I started reading that book. So at that point I started making sure I followed a particular format when it came to screenwriting, and from there I wrote about 4 or 5 screenplays. And but that moment was very important to up until what I'm doing now. The thing about storytelling is that I learned a lot of my storytelling skills through watching movies, just watching what movies are on TV, what movies are being nominated for Oscars. I made it a thing every year to make sure I watch every movie that won an Oscar to try to see what people liked and what appealed to people. So it was, and that's something I've been doing for years, even until now. I like to see different narratives of what catch people's attention. So when I write now, I'm always going to write something opposite of myself. One, to challenge myself. I think that a writer who likes to tell stories should always challenge themselves. Do not write what's easiest to you. Write something, seek out to write something that really is not super easy to you. The thing about storytelling is there are 3 points. If I put a point here, and a point here, I have 3 points. But if I draw a line to all those points, you have a triangle. So it's very important when you're doing storytelling to bring all the points together to make one story. So many times if you see a movie that's not good, one of those points are missing. Some movies start in the middle to the end. It doesn't really matter what point is the beginning of the story. What matters is that you bring those points together to make a full picture. So as I talk to many people about creative writing, I also tell people that, and this may not, I know some people won't agree with this, but this is something that I've done. I don't write an outline. That's what I'm trying to say, an outline. I don't write outlines because I believe an outline really limits your natural storytelling abilities, and many times when you write an outline, you are really trapped by that outline. You try to stick to that outline, so your mind is not free to take the story so many different places. So I don't write with outlines. I usually, when I sit down to write, most of the time I have the story in my mind much long before I sit down to write. I know exactly where I'm going with it. And once you kind of know where you're going with it, when you sit down to write it, it the story don't necessarily come out the way you was thinking it. But after so long of writing it, the story starts to write itself. Actually, the pages starts telling you exactly what to put on those pages to write the story. The hardest part I find about writing It's actually sitting down and doing it. I think that's the hardest part for any writer. It's actually just sit down, discipline yourself to actually sit down and actually write the story. I think a lot of times we tell ourselves that, oh, nobody's gonna like this, or we have so much doubt in ourselves that a lot of times we may think twice before we actually sit down and actually write. But you have to actually just sit down and challenge yourself to do it. I have written many screenplays, and I just released my second book, Half Empty, Half Full, and I plan on starting my third book next month. I mean, in 2 weeks, starting my third book, so that'll be out sometime next year. But it's fun once you get into it. Once you start writing the story, it's fun because these characters are developing in your mind, and you are creating a story that exists uh, within the confines of this book. So it's fun because it takes you places, it takes your mind places that your mind wouldn't normally go. So it's very important for a writer to connect with their work. When I write a book, I go to sleep thinking about it. I wake up thinking about it. I keep my mind on it. If I'm washing the dishes, I'm constantly thinking about the story, and it helps me really develop the story in more ways than one. I constantly keep my mind on it. And then that way, the story starts to really write itself. Elements that I may have sat down at the table with in the beginning may not be the same elements by the time I finish the book. Things that I had planned to put in the story might not go in the story. But I think it's very important for a writer or person who's thinking about writing books. Some key things: character development. You wanna know your story, and then you want to develop your character. So if I had a character named Tammy, well, that's just the name. But you want to give Tommy an age. You want to give Tommy some type of attitude, how you want her to present herself. And that's the person she needs to be throughout the story. She can't start off going to Bible study and then end up in the strip club. Unless of course your story is based on that. But you want to make sure your character is has a background. You really want to develop your characters, make sure they have a life, a background, so that way when you're writing these characters in the book or a screenplay, it doesn't misguide the audience or the reader because the character is being who the characters are going to be. Most of the time, when you watch a movie and a screenplay, at least when I was writing, it was 120 pages. When you write a screenplay, it's 120 pages is the normal length of a screenplay. That's a minute per page, which equals to a 2-hour movie. If you watch a movie, usually around between 40 and 50 minutes, you will see a shift in a good movie. You will see something happen. Something's going to shift between 45 minutes of the film. Usually a screenplay, you're going to use the first 40 minutes to create the problem. You're going to use the second 40 minutes to overcome the problem. And you're going to usually have the last 40 minutes to conclude the problem. That's 120 minutes right there, which is 2 hours. So when you are writing characters, you want to make sure that your character is in place, and when you're writing a story, you definitely do not want to play your reader as not being smart people. If you cut corners, if you cut corners telling the story, you're gonna lose your reader. You're gonna lose your audience if you cut corners. So it's very important to be thorough with your storytelling, and it's very important to make sure that you're taking a reader on a journey, and to a journey that they're not gonna scratch their head. But what about this? What happened to this? What happened to that? Usually, at least for myself, when I watch a movie and I see something, and soon as something happens, that whenever a story has to do something stupid in order to move forward, it's not a good movie. When the story has to do something totally out of ordinary in order for the story to keep happening, then it started off wrong in the first place. So you want to make sure that everything connects smoothly from beginning, middle, and to end, that's smart with your story. And again, these are just things that I've learned with my experience, and these are things that has helped me be a writer and write screenplays and about storytelling. Storytelling is very important in society more than people know. Storytelling is very powerful, especially when you know how to tell a story. Some of my best films, Godfather, not the Goodfather. I guess I was trying to say Goodfellas, but Godfather is one of my favorite films. I think it's probably as perfection as you're gonna get to filmmaking and telling the story. And as far as myself, I just released Half Empty, Half Full, which is a book, probably one of the best books that I wrote, one of the best stories that I wrote. And then I started Black Books for Us, and that's to bring in other storytellers to the website to sell books. It's strictly a site for selling books to really get our stories out there, to really, really, really bring in young storytellers and really, because there are people out there telling great stories that have no way to get their story into other people's hands. So I would simply say, if you're going to decide to write a story, first be dedicated to it. Because what I learned in the beginning of my quest to tell stories is that I would sit down and I would write, and then I wouldn't write for another 3 or 4 months. And so, and your mindset is different when you do that. But the best thing to do is to write and stick with it, because it's going to give you the best vibration and you're going to be more connected to that story. If you sit down and write and get up and you don't write for 2 or 3 months, your mind, believe it or not, your mindset is not going to be the same as it was 2 or 3 months prior. So it's important to write and stick with it. If you're going to take some time off, don't do it longer than a couple of weeks. Come back to it, and you'll start to connect with the story on levels that you wouldn't connect with if you was 2 or 3 months from that keyboard. So, it's very important to continue to write a story and continue and see it out to end. You do with every story, you always come to a part where it gets difficult. You have to explain a certain particular scene in a book or a screenplay, and it kind of makes you back away from the deck. That's because you have to figure out how you're going to get this information across or how you're going to write it. But just find your way through it. It may not be that day, but the next day, if you keep your mind on it, those pages will tell you exactly what to put and how to get past those particular parts of the story. So I would strongly suggest discipline, being disciplined when you sit down and write. And it's hard. I'm still not disciplined, and I write, and I'm still not. I'm more disciplined than what I was, but I am becoming more disciplined to sit down and tell a story. So that's my masterclass. I'm D Revolution. Thank you.